From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
It is my great privilege to introduce a winning team, Carmen Agra Deedy and her husband, John McCutcheon. They're veterans of the National Book Festival, and they're going to entertain us today with both music and storytelling. Their performance is based on Carmen's new book, The Cheshire Cheese Cat. The subtitle is A Dickens of a Tale, so it's an engaging story of a lively and resourceful set of animals in the 19th century in London. So they're going to take us back in place and time. Born in Havana, Cuba, and raised in Decatur, Georgia, Deedy is an author and masterful storyteller. She has published a number of award-winning books. I have at least one other here, the 14 Cows for America. She's also written Library Dragon, The Yellow Star, and Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. Ms. Deedy has also been a presenter on National Public Radio, and 12 of her commentaries were released as a book entitled Growing Up Cuban in Decatur, Georgia. One of the librarians in the audience today is Roberta Stevens. Roberta, where are you? Oh, yeah. Roberta is over here. We're very proud of Roberta. She has just finished her term as president of the American Library Association. And in her presidential campaign, she featured authors and librarians and how they're connected and how authors can help support libraries. Carmen Deedy was so generous during Roberta's campaign in providing video public service announcements aimed at building support for libraries. Carmen, we are all grateful to you. Thank you. John McCutcheon is a master musician. He's recorded music for children over the years. He did a popular children's album called How'd You Do that was released in 1983, and several other children's albums followed. He told me once that when he was a college student in the Midwest, he took his junior year abroad in Appalachia, a place that seemed as remote to him as any foreign country. And he fell in love with the regional music in that part of the country. He is proficient on instruments such as guitar, banjo, auto harp, and he is known as a master of the hammered dulcimer, an instrument frequently featured in his music. He's also a writer. I have one of his books here called Christmas in the Trenches. And his latest CD it's just been released, right, John? It's called This Land, Woody Guthrie's America. So you can see that his range of music is broad and far-reaching. In 2006, McCutcheon collaborated with several contemporary writers and poets to produce the literary album Mightier Than the Sword. The library's former poet laureate consultant, Rita Dove, was one of the poets, and she spoke here yesterday. So please join me in giving the best welcome you can to Carmen Agra Deedy and John McCutcheon.
I find it very heartening that although I've heard proclaimed, and I know you all have, for a number of years now, that the book is dead. That, like Samuel Clemens, this festival seems to prove that its demise has been greatly exaggerated. So we're going to do something a little different than what you expected. We want to talk to you about stories. I'm going to tell you a couple little personal stories. John's going to sing you a couple of folk ballads. Why stories? My little intro is going to be about 3 or 4 minutes, and that's it. And I know there's a lot of white noise, but we're so glad you're here. There are a lot of children here of the heart, and little ones too. So I'm a grandma now, so is John's a grandpa. A century ago, the notion that one day the human species might find storytelling obsolete would have been met, I think you all will agree, with scorn, maybe even with hilarity. Very few of us are laughing now, right? Children are increasingly growing up in a world without story. We get home from dinner, and many families, they don't have the time for the family meal where tales were passed around. How many parents, weary after a day of work, can conjure up stories out of their heads as my father did at bedtime every night? How many grandparents live leagues away from their children and grandchildren when once there were multicultural homes and these grandparents were the source of wondrous tales? So, for those of us who work with children, this is kind of an alarming evolutionary trend. And this is the boring part, stay with me. Why does it matter? Does it really matter if our children receive their stories through bits and bytes of technology rather than from some carbon-based life form? Cannot the machine deliver a story? It can deliver a narrative, but it takes a human being to deliver a story. You see, we employ machines, but guys, we are not machines yet. Hey there, buddy. You're doing great. We're social animals. Would you agree with that? Still. And the empathic tie that binds me to you, ma'am, on the front row, and you probably to that fellow next to you, maybe, and you, lady, over there to that gentleman over there, is storytelling. It's like a gossamer thread that we fling, and we catch one and another's imagination. Once, when I was a child, and granted that was 5,000 years ago when the stones were soft, a trip to the Piggly Wiggly it wasn't a trip for vegetables or for meat or for other household sundries. It was a storytelling expedition, and you came back. And in my house, you heard, Dios mío, you're not going to believe what happened to me. Or if I was at my neighbor's, la, baby, I just saw them Carruthers. God, their family tree don't fork. I defy a machine to give you that, and even when you see a human being deliver that through a machine, it's not the same. You know why? Because I am here, and you see me, and I see you. So here's the end. Oh. When a child grows up without hearing stories, family stories, bless you, she enters adulthood with an incomplete sense of her personal history. This is loss enough, but when this same child grows up without hearing the folk tales, fairy tales, myths, and legends that are their inheritance, is a child's inheritance, she grows up with an imperfect sense of what it means to be a member of the human family. These tales, these old stories, carry deep within them the wit and wisdom of hundreds, thousands of years of culture. They teach us how to treat our enemies, how to fight our monsters, how to die with dignity, how to laugh at ourselves. Imagine. I think our politicians could use a dose of those, don't you? They're a child's birthright in a most singular heirloom because you cannot lose a story in a fire, you can't wash it away in a flood, you can't leave it behind in an evacuation. A story is an inheritance indestructible except for one thing. Its survival hangs on one immutable requirement. A story must be told. So we're here to tell you some today, and John's going to start with a wonderful ballad some of you may know. Tag. bag. You're it.
Boy, just a little baby boy. There's this guy, John Henry, and when he was just a little baby boy, sitting on his papa's knee, he said the Big Bend Tunnel on the C&O line gonna be the death of me, gonna be the death of me. Well, the captain, he said, John Henry, gonna bring that old steam drill around. I'm gonna bring that old steam drill right out on the job. Whoop that old steel right on down. Whoop that old steel right on down. Well, John Henry said to the captain, he said, a man ain't nothing but a man. But before I would let that old steam drill beat me down, I'd die with this hammer in my hand. Die with this hammer in my hand. Well, John Henry hammered on the mountain. His hammer was striking fire. Well, he worked so hard that he broke his poor heart. Laid down his hammer and he died. Laid down his hammer and he died. That was the moment that I said, hold on now, just one second. I was 9 years old. I was in the 4th grade. And I was in the classroom when no one else was in there listening to a record I had taken from the school library. That's what they used to call media centers, children. And I will not get into the particulars of why I was in the classroom by myself, other than to say I was the only 4th grader that was there when all my other classmates had to go home for the day. And Mrs. Wachtel had sent me to the library to talk to the librarian children to get a record to write a report on. And I picked this album up, and I got to this verse, and I picked the needle up, and I went right back to the librarian. And I said, hold on a second now. You have thrown me a curveball. I like this John Henry guy for about 4 verses. And then he dies? That's not supposed to happen in my little 9-year-old world. And she said, oh, you're 9. I didn't know that. You have not yet read The Yearling. I can see from the card catalog you have not checked out Old Yeller. You are not prepared for this kind of emotional ambiguity. And I said, yeah, not when it involves banjos. So I said, well, what does this mean? I don't get this. She said, have you ever heard of heroes? I said, you mean like Henry Aaron? She said, yeah, or like John Henry. Or like Jackie Robinson, I said. She said, yes. Or like that woman a few years ago who wouldn't get up from her seat in the bus. When you're a hero, you got to be willing to stand up for yourself and for other people. You got to be brave. That's what that song is supposed to teach you. I completely understood. Which led me the following day out to the playground, where I walked up to the playground bully, Mike Burke, who had kicked my butt every day I had been there at Our Lady of Perpetual Guilt School. And I walked up to him and said, Mike Burke, you ain't nothing but a steam engine. And I'm here to stand up to you. He said, oh yeah, and then he punched me in the nose. 5 minutes later, I was back in the library. And I said, you know, this just did not work out the way I intended. She said, don't tell me what happened, son. And I told her. She said, well, to be a hero doesn't mean you have to do it all on your own. I mean, John Henry, he had help. He had a shaker that worked with him. Jackie Robinson, he had his teammates, especially Pee Wee Reese. That woman who sat on the bus, she had a plan. And she had lots of people who were willing to not ride the bus after she refused to sit in another place. So you need help. You got to be brave, but you got to be smart. I knew exactly what she's talking about. The next day I marched right up to Mike Burke and said, Mike, you still ain't nothing but a doggone steam engine. And that's exactly what I think and what Johnny Kirchmar thinks and what Mike McLaughlin thinks and what Becky Rodehaver thinks too. And they all said, yeah. He said, oh yeah? Want to play kickball? Now every Monday morning when the bluebirds begin to sing, way up yonder 5 mile or more, you hear John Henry's hammer ring. You can hear John Henry's hammer ring. Hear John Henry's hammer ring. Lord God, now listen to that cold steel ring. Listen. Thank you.
I came to love stories much the same way as John. Uh-oh. There we go. Yep. No? Yes? All right. I'd been abandoned for the day. Abandoned unto the indifferent care of my older sister. How many of you have a big sister? How many of you are the long-suffering younger child? She left me at the library. She had things to do. She had a ballet class. And I had not ever been into the Maud M. Burris Public Library on purpose. I walked in. It was dark and cool, like those old libraries. There was a of a ceiling fan. Shelves to the left, shelves to the right, and down the center corridor at the back, a great oak circulation desk. A picture of whom I suppose was the august Maud M. Burris, and seated, a traditionally built Southern woman of her time. Her hair was sprayed into a perfect football helmet. Her eyes had been, remember arching? Not plucking, arching your eyebrows. It was done for you. You didn't do it for yourself. They were like suspended apostrophes up on her forehead. And they just kind of moved up when she saw me, and she said in those languid southern tones that speak of someone who's lived through malarial climates one too many seasons, "Come here, child. I think I'm in the wrong place." She waggled her fingers. "Come here, baby. I haven't seen you in here before." "That's because I don't come in here." "You have a curious way of speaking." I knew this. I looked her in the eye and shot back, "You thought funny too." To my surprise, her face split in a smile. She gave a snort, covered the bottom half of her face, and said, "You're going to need a library card." She introduced me quickly to the library card people. Back before you beep, 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 beep. Very efficient, but so unromantic. I added my name to a list of other children's names. Remember those library cards? You know, like I used to see Robert McPherson's name on nearly every book I checked out, and it was like an unofficial reader's recommendation. I checked out my book, and as I took it, unlike John's librarian, I'm truncating the story for some of you that know it, she said, "Good luck. You'll be sorry." I took the book home and I read it. No, I devoured this book. And I learned that when you first put your foot onto the road of readership, a terrible thing happens. Everybody interrupts you. You know, you save that book forever, the one by McCullough that's that thick. You get on the plane, you're going to cross the country, and the 32B is your best friend. At 8, I just couldn't find a place. I climbed my favorite magnolia. I read under the covers of a chenille bedspread with a flashlight.
She still does that.
And, peanut gallery. I finished the book one sweltering afternoon on the sagging wooden step of my old shotgun house. My mother inside, my steelworker daddy still at work. That's why a Cuban woman talks like this. I'm sorry, y'all. You brought us to the South. This is what happens. But I finished that last page, and the page was sodden, wet for you children, soggy. That kind of crying. I clutched it to me. I raced 3 blocks from my house to town center without telling anyone where I was going. Don't do it. It was in some respects a gentler time. And we were feral children back then. I reached the library, and she was coming out, Oliver, horn to hoof, suddenly visible. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, you're moist." I wasn't just moist, I was like rubber cement. She reached into that expansive bosom and liberated a handkerchief, and I cleaned myself up, and I offered it back, and she said, "That's all right, you may keep it." And she asked me what was so terribly wrong, and I held up that book. I finished it. Oh, no. I know. Oh, dear. You're crying, too. Oh, yes. She's dead. I know. E.B. White was a sadist. Charlotte is dead. She just nodded and said, "It should have been Templeton." I know, he was a rat. I mean, take the rat, people, take the rat. We both stood there for a moment, and she said, "I'm sorry, I tried to warn you. I hate this book." And she looked at me, and if I had taken one of those rods out of the card catalog, remember those? And I had pierced the dragon's heart, I couldn't have caused more harm, it seems. She just seemed like she couldn't breathe, and she heaved a couple of times. Miss Mary McDonald, you love this book. I don't believe you don't love this book. You love this book. Say it. Say it. I love this book. And before I knew it, y'all, the words left my mouth. They slipped out like starlings out of the Presbyterian church steeple at dusk. Give me another one. She started to laugh and cry at the same time. And how's the story end? It ends like this. That woman took that long string of keys, and they hung one down the other like a rosary. Opened up that library and said, "I've got a better book for you than Charlotte's Web." I was incensed. "There's no better book than Charlotte's Web." "Easy, Tiger. You haven't read Anne of Green Gables." And she said, "It's about a smart-mouthed little girl and a cranky old woman." Hey, that's kind of like you and me. Careful. Careful.
Every night at our house, Carmen and I take up our positions on our old front porch. We live in a wonderful little town called Avondale Estates, Georgia. It's not anywhere near as highfalutin as it sounds. It is undergoing a major degentrification program, which began the day we moved in. It is the home of Waffle House. That's right, the Waffle House Museum is right down the street from our house. Y'all come. And one of the things we do every night is we talk about stories and book ideas that we have. And one of the questions we always get at Q&As after presentations like this is, where do you get your ideas? Doesn't matter whether you're writing a song or a book. We get them from pretty much the same places. We read things in newspapers. We adopt characters we've read in other books. We take old family stories and craft them into something our own. Every once in a while, we actually make up something clear out of our own heads. Every writer I know is a wonderful eavesdropper. For me, sometimes you just have to watch SportsCenter. Ellensburg, Washington, the sun shone so bright. Beautiful day for a game. When Sarah Tukolsky stepped up to the plate, she knew she would ne'er be the same. It was senior day, and in all her 4 seasons, she'd had no worse year than this one. Batting under 100, she knew at month's end that her softball career would be done. Oh, she looked at a strike. She looked at the sky. She thought how she'd miss playing ball. She took a deep breath and swung for life or death. Sent the next pitch right over the wall. Sarah Tukolsky sprinted for first. She'd never once hit a home run. But halfway to second, her left knee gave out, and in an instant her season was done. She lay in the base path, writhing in pain. The dirt and the tears stained her face. She knew that her run could not be recorded until she had touched every base. So she looked to her teammates, she looked to her coach, but the ump said the rules are quite clear. No one from Western's allowed to assist you, when above her a strange voice said, "Here." Mallory Holtman played first base for Central. She reached out her hand to the ground. Oh, those rules don't say nothing about your opponents. Get up and I'll get you around. So with her teammate Liz Wallace, Mallory Holtman picked Sarah right up like a feather. They carried her around till she touched every base. Then the 3 girls crossed home plate together. Thus, Sarah Tukolsky got her home run, though she didn't do it alone. Sometimes help comes from where you least expect it and carries you all the way home. Ellensburg, Washington, the sun shone so bright. Beautiful day for a game. Thanks.
So, quick 3-minute story, because we're gunning it to the end. I learned to love books thanks to Mary McDonald. It's almost her name. I learned to love words from a different woman. I was 14 years old, and I still talk like this. Do you understand? Say yes. Okay. I was a struggling English student, although I was an avid reader by now. I loved stories. I was a father who is, at 87, the most marvelous storyteller I know. He was born in 1924 in Camagüey, Cuba. But I was struggling. And so my teacher called me, and in a move that I consider bold and revolutionary to this day, she did not decide to hand me a book with a dumbed-down text. Go figure. Some of you are clearly not in education, or you'd be on the floor rolling right now. She did not decide that because I thought like that, I also think like that. She thought that maybe behind that there might be like, a brain like ticky-ting, 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 ticky-ting. She handed me Macbeth. And like my other teacher, she gave me an instruction. Well, she wasn't a teacher, but a teacher doesn't have to have a title. She said, read it. Tell me what you think. I'll leaf through it. It's this big. I mean, it's the thinnest thing. I read it through the night. I read it with the help of a very cheap, very dog-eared Woolworth's encyclopedia. Dictionary. It's one of those old Websters. You get it for like 10 cents at Woolworth's. I struck Thane. What's a Thane? I forged on, though, because the story was so compelling, and I pulled an all-nighter, which I could do in those days. And when I went to school, I was abuzz. See, I was new baptized into the world of all things Shakespeare, and I found Miss Jolinda Collins, and I said, Miss Collins, and I was trembling. Did he write anything else? She says to this day it's her favorite student story. And boy, howdy did he. She was the woman that gave me many a great title. She was the woman who introduced me to the fabulous, fantastical language and stories of Charles Dickens, the Boz. And thanks to her, we recently wrote a book about that. But now I think John has a song he wants to sing, and I think are we going to make him join us? Are you game?
Even you, sweetheart.
I don't sing.
Oh, yes, she does. She sings in the kitchen. She sings more than I do around the house. I'll tell them more if you'll do that again.
Oh, nice.
It's the children's 10, I'm sorry.
Hope you enjoyed your last visit to the National Book Festival. I certainly have.
Wait a minute. I
Tell
wasn't
them
the
about our
one with the
nation's storyteller.
claw.
Tell them. They're waiting to hear, and we're running out of time. Tell them about our nation's great storyteller.
As Deirdre was kind enough to say, the project that I've been involved in this year is putting together an album in honor of Woody Guthrie's 100th birthday in 2012. And I decided right away not to make it a tribute album, but rather to assemble a collection of his songs that really gave his vision as a displaced migrant inside this country of what this country was about and for. And this is a song that has a long history in this spot. A mere 2.5 years ago, some of you were probably there. It was a cold January Sunday afternoon, and 500,000 people gathered on the National Mall for a concert. And about a month before the event, the list of who was going to be in this pre-inaugural concert started to circulate. And it was quite a list. Oh, it was U2 and Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce and Betty LaVette and the Marine Corps Band and Josh Groban and Garth Brooks and everybody. Except me. But on the very bottom of the list, the last name on the list, it said Pete Seeger. And I thought, there's change I can believe in. Because Pete has actually played on the National Mall many times, never actually in support of a president before. But so amazed was I to see him included in this that I called his house. And his wife Toshi answered the phone, and I said, "Hey Toshi, it's John. Let me talk to Pete." And she calls him Peter. She says, "Peter's not here." And I said, "Well, okay, I'll call back after supper tonight when he's back." She says, "No, he's not here. He won't be here tonight. He's on tour. He'll be back." And I said, "He's on what?" "He's on tour, just like you, John. He's gone for 2 weeks. It's 12 cities. He'll be back a week from Wednesday." I said, "Yeah, just like me, Toshi, except Pete is 90 years old." Yes, Peter is the only person who doesn't seem to understand that. I said, "You poor woman, you must be worried sick." She says, "Oh no, I'm so glad he's gone. He's driving me crazy. He just paces around the house worried he's not being useful." And friends, if you think about it, It's all we can hope for, isn't it? That we be useful our whole lives. So to close out that whole day, when I finally talked to Pete, I said, Pete, I just got to know, you've waited 90 years and you get one song. What are you going to sing? Those of you who were there, those of you who, like me, saw it on television, know that he finished off the day, as we will, singing the song that he taught this entire country, written by this country's greatest storyteller. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and... Oh, sing it, America. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you. The sun came shining, the sun came as I was strolling, the wheat fields waving and the dust clouds rolling. As the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting. What did it say? This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made. In preparation for this album, they let me at the Guthrie Archives see the actual first draft of this song. So if you want the whole story, you need to know that on February 23rd, 1940, when Woody wrote this song, he wrote a bunch of verses that never made the cut into your elementary school music books. Verses like, was a great high wall there that tried to stop me, and a great big sign that said private property on the other side. It didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and in the city square, in the cities, beneath the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I saw my people. Some stood there hungry. I stood there wondering if this land was made for you and me. Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever turn me back, because this land was made. I'll sing it once more. This land is Carmen Agra Deedy
And John McCutcheon, go home and tell those stories, sing those songs. Our children need them.
Bye-bye. Should we take a breath?
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.